She believed she had the perfect setup, a jab cloaked as humor. But in mere moments, Trump flipped the script, leaving her scrambling to regain her footing on live television. The stage was set, a gleaming Los Angeles studio, packed with an audience hungry for drama. Cameras rolled, tension palpable, though not a word had yet been spoken. Seated at the oversized, glossy interview desk was Donald Trump, posture relaxed, expression inscrutable. Across from him sat Lindsay Moore, a liberal talk show host famed for her biting wit and relentless takedowns of conservative figures. She had built her career on moments like these, provoking, prodding, watching her guests squirm under the heat of her questions. Tonight, she had a plan. The audience buzzed with anticipation, shifting in their seats, expecting fireworks. Trump's interviews were never dull, and Moore knew exactly how to stir the pot. The moment the cameras went live, she went on the offensive. "Mr. Trump, thank you for being here," she said with a saccharine smile, her voice dripping with faux politeness. Trump nodded slightly, hands folded. "My pleasure, Lindsay. Let's see if you can keep up." A few chuckles rippled through the crowd, but Moore didn't flinch. She welcomed the banter. The opening minutes followed a predictable rhythm: politics, policy, the usual back and forth. Moore took shots. Trump deflected effortlessly. The audience was entertained, but they were waiting for something bigger, something personal, and Moore was about to deliver. She shifted in her chair, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, as if preparing to drop a bombshell. Then, with a casual air, she leaned in, her eyes gleaming with something just shy of malice. She asked the question, but had no idea what was coming next. For a split second, the room froze. The air grew heavier, as if the temperature had shifted. The audience, once murmuring and chuckling, fell silent. Even the camera operators, trained to remain detached, seemed to hesitate. Moore kept her smirk, but something in her posture betrayed her. She had gone too far, and she knew it. The words hung in the air, bold and shameless. "Have you ever thought about cheating on Melania? Because let's be honest, she's kind of outdated." It was a low blow, delivered without flinching. The insult was wrapped in a joke, but the intent was unmistakable. She wasn't just prodding for a reaction. She was baiting him, daring him to stumble in front of millions. The audience didn't know whether to gasp or laugh. Some chuckled nervously. Others exchanged wide-eyed glances. Even those who weren't Trump supporters could tell this wasn't just a political jab, it was personal. It was cruel. For the first time that evening, Trump didn't respond immediately. He simply stared, not at Moore, not at the audience, but at the desk in front of him, his fingers lightly tapping against the surface. The tension was suffocating. Moore shifted slightly in her chair. She hadn't expected silence. She expected an outburst, a dismissive wave, maybe a crude joke in return, but not this. Then, slowly, Trump lifted his head. His expression was unreadable, a mix of amusement, disbelief, and something sharper. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. "Let me get this straight," he said, pausing just long enough for the weight of his words to settle. "You're sitting there, on national television, calling my wife, the former First Lady of the United States, outdated?" The word lingered, sharp as a blade. Somewhere in the crowd, someone muttered, "Damn." Moore gave a half-hearted shrug, clearly trying to maintain her composure. "Oh, come on, Donald," she said, forcing a laugh. "It's just a question. Lighten up." Trump leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on hers. "It's not a question, Lindsay. It's an insult. But let's pretend for a second that you actually meant it as a real question." The smirk on her face wavered. Trump gestured toward the audience. "Imagine if I flipped it around. Imagine I was sitting here with a married female politician, a Democrat, of course, and I asked her, 'Hey, have you ever thought about cheating on your husband? Because, let's be honest, he's kind of outdated." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, others sat up straighter. Trump let that thought hang before continuing. You'd have CNN running a special about how I'm a misogynist. Before I even left this building, the headlines would be screaming, and you'd be leading the charge, wouldn't you? Moore opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Trump wasn't done yet. Let's talk about outdated. The word was hers, but now it belonged to him. He clasped his hands together, his voice steady. Melania Trump speaks 5 languages. She's been a successful businesswoman. She was the First Lady of the United States. And you are feminist? A champion of so-called women's empowerment. You sit here and try to reduce her value to an expiration date? Moore shifted in her chair, forcing a small smirk. Oh, come on, Donald. It was just a joke. Trump tilted his head. A joke? Well, let me ask you something, Lindsay. Do you have an expiration date? The smirk vanished. The audience made a sound half gasp, half murmur. Moore's fingers twitched slightly against the table. She was scrambling, trying to spin this back in her favor. Trump didn't wait. You want to talk about outdated? Like it's some kind of punchline? Let's be real here. If a conservative man had sat in this chair and called Michelle Obama outdated, you'd be calling for his career, his job, his head on a plate. A flicker of something crossed Moore's face. She knew he wasn't wrong. But Trump wasn't done. You know what's really outdated, Lindsay? This tired, lazy, recycled strategy of trying to humiliate conservative figures by attacking their wives, their families, their marriages. When you can't take me down, you go after the people around me. Moore shook her head, laughing lightly. Oh, please, Donald. Trump cut in, his tone sharper now. Did you ask Joe Biden if he's ever thought about cheating on Jill? No, you didn't. Did you ask Barack Obama if he ever thought about cheating on Michelle? No, you didn't. Because you know it's disgusting. You know it's low. But when it's me, suddenly it's just a joke. Silence. Even the crew members behind the cameras had stopped moving. Moore's jaw was tight. She wasn't used to losing control. But Trump wasn't just on the defense. He was flipping the entire script. He shook his head, exhaling. You know, Lindsay, for years, you guys have been screaming about feminism, about women's rights, about respect. And yet, the first chance you get, you sit here and mock a woman-me wife, simply because she's over 50. Another shift in the audience. People were rethinking. Trump let out a chuckle, but it wasn't one of amusement, it was disbelief. So tell me, Lindsay, when does a woman become outdated in your eyes? What's the cutoff? 45? 50? Should we just start retiring women from relevance once they hit menopause? Moore had nothing. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The audience was no longer with her. She had thrown a punch, expecting Trump to stumble. Instead, she had given him the moment of the night. But the fallout was just beginning. Within minutes of the interview wrapping up, clips of the exchange flooded social media. The moment Moore asked her infamous question, followed by Trump's unflinching takedown, spread like wildfire. One viral post read, Lindsay Moore thought she was about to embarrass Trump. Instead, she got obliterated on live television. This is brutal. The clip amassed millions of views within hours. Comment sections erupted. Imagine the outrage if someone called Michelle Obama outdated on national television. Lindsay Moore just played herself. Trump didn't just defend Melania. He exposed the hypocrisy of these so-called feminists. The backlash against Moore was swift and relentless. By the next morning, headlines dominated the news cycle. Lindsay Moore under fire for disrespectful question about Melania Trump. Did Lindsay Moore cross the line? Feminist hypocrisy. Host faces backlash for outdated remark. Sponsors for Moore's show began feeling the heat. Emails poured in demanding to know whether they condoned ageism and double standards. Moore tried to respond on Instagram, posting a carefully crafted statement. As a journalist, I ask tough questions. That's my job. I regret if my words were misinterpreted, but I stand by my right to challenge public figures. It didn't help. No one was misinterpreting anything. They had all heard it clear as day. By the next evening, Moore's name was everywhere, but not in the way she had hoped. What started as an attempt to humiliate Trump had backfired spectacularly, turning her into the target of a backlash she hadn't anticipated. Media watchdog groups called her out for sexism and hypocrisy. One op-ed in the Wall Street Journal questioned, why would a host who spent years championing women's rights mock a woman based on her age? Even some liberal voices distanced themselves from her remarks. CNN's Jake Patterson admitted, "Look, I'm no fan of Trump, but this question wasn't journalism. It was a cheap shot, and he turned it around on her hard." Meanwhile, conservative outlets had a field day. On Fox News, a panel dissected the moment, frame by frame, calling it one of the most embarrassing cell phones in television history. Moore's employers were in damage control mode. A leaked memo revealed that executives at the network were furious. While they publicly supported Moore, privately, they knew this was bad. Viewership for her show had plummeted. Advertisers were hesitant. The following Monday, Moore opened her show with an apology. A forced, half-hearted attempt to calm the outrage. In the heat of the moment, I made a remark that was taken the wrong way. It was never my intention to offend or degrade anyone. I deeply respect Melania Trump, and I regret if my words were misinterpreted. It didn't work. Comments flooded in immediately. Classic non-apology. Taken the wrong way? We all heard you loud and clear. You regret that people noticed your hypocrisy, not what you said. So much for empowering women. By the end of the month, Moore was on vacation. Some said it was a quiet suspension. Others speculated that she was done for good. One thing was certain. She had underestimated Trump. She thought she could land a punch and move on. Instead, she had walked into a storm she wasn't prepared for. The dust was still settling, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just about Lindsay Moore anymore. This interview had exposed something deeper. In the days that followed, discussion stretched beyond Trump, beyond Melania, beyond even Moore. The moment had turned into a debate about media bias, double standards, and the way powerful women, especially conservative ones, were treated. Conservative commentators pointed out the hypocrisy. If this had been a liberal woman, the media would be calling it sexism. But because it's Melania, they laugh. Even some left-leaning voices admitted the question had been out of line. I don't like Trump, but there's something ugly about using a woman's age as an attack. We don't do that to men. The conversation wasn't just about Melania Trump anymore. It was about Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, Michelle Obama, women in power who had all, at some point, been ridiculed for their looks, their age, their husbands. But here's where it got interesting. The same people who had spent years calling out sexism and media bias were suddenly quiet when the target was Melania. Trump supporters saw it for what it was. They don't actually care about women. They care about controlling the conversation. And Lindsay? She became the perfect example of what people were tired of. The media's selective outrage. The way some women's dignity was worth defending, but others were fair game. Trump had turned the attack into a win. He didn't just defend his wife. He forced the conversation into uncomfortable territory. People had to ask themselves, why was it okay to attack a conservative woman this way? Why do we let some jokes slide but not others? Why do feminists stay silent when it's a woman they don't like? And whether you agreed with Trump or not, the question stuck. This wasn't just a viral clip. This was a reckoning. The clip didn't just make headlines. It became a turning point. Lindsay Moore's cheap shot at Melania Trump wasn't just an embarrassing moment. It was a mirror held up to the media's hypocrisy. Trump had done what few politicians ever managed to do. He didn't get defensive. He didn't lash out. He exposed the double standard calmly and effectively. And people noticed. For weeks, the internet kept the debate alive. Was this just another example of bias in media? Would a liberal woman have been treated the same way? Why do certain people get protected, while others are fair game? And perhaps the biggest question of all, when did we decide a woman's worth had an expiration date? That last question stuck with people. Because at its core, this wasn't just about Trump. It wasn't just about Melania. It wasn't even about Lindsay Moore. It was about respect. It was about the hypocrisy of the so-called empowerment movement that only protects women they agree with. And for many people watching, it was a wake-up call. Melania Trump was many things. A former model, a businesswoman, a first lady. But she was not outdated. She was not disposable. And no woman should be. The moment Lindsay Moore smirked and thought she had landed her punchline, she had already lost. She exposed herself. And Trump? He didn't just win the argument. He changed the conversation. What do you think? Should more people call out this kind of hypocrisy? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.